always, just another week closer to an NFL season, and tonight's a very special edition of our show as we get ready for the NFL schedule to be released on Thursday. We're finally going to find out. We have the matchups, we know which teams are going to play each other, but in what sequence, where, and of course, where on the TV schedule. That's always what interests me. Where in the NFL media world will things fall? We have a lot to talk about in that regard. And like always, we're going to cover the news and notes around the NFL. But a special part of the episode tonight is we're going to really dive into fantasy football. We're making this a fantasy football focused show tonight. So if you love the NFL, you love fantasy football, this is definitely the show for you tonight, because we're going to talk about early on, now that we have a lot of free agency over, now that we have the draft behind us, what teams do we want to focus on, maybe stack our teams with, which players do we want to target. If you're in an auction draft league, how are you going to play it? If you're in a snake draft league, how are the draft gods going to benefit you or curse you? And how do you take advantage of what we now know about the new NFL landscape? So over the next half hour or so, that's what we're going to do. Of course, want to introduce the other members of our show that'll be joining us via via Twitter Spaces. So you may be hearing them through our microphone if you're on TikTok Live. But I definitely want to introduce those who are contributing, not just to the show tonight, but to our content overall across our website and a number of our other platforms. So I want to definitely give them a big shout out. Check out Adam. You can find him on Twitter at @SpotterAJ. @SpotterAJ does a great job for us across a number of sports. So check him out @SpotterAJ. You'll hear from him later tonight. And Michael Dobbin, you can find him at MikeDobbs94 on Twitter. Both excited to talk to both of you guys tonight, but we're going to start by kind of laying things out and what's really important about tonight's show in terms of the NFL calendar, and that is what's going on in the NFL schedule dropping in the next couple of days. Adam, I know you are a big Green Bay Packers fan. What game right now are you most excited about? And is there a hope that there's a certain team that you see week one of the season?
Hey, Wyatt. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, of course. I didn't give my normal introduction. I just jumped right into it tonight. So,
I'm fantastic tonight, and the reason I'm fantastic is because the biggest news out of Packer Nation is that they released long snapper Jack Coco. So, if that's the biggest news coming out of Packer Nation, I'm in great shape. Great shape. So,
that's what you get in a post Aaron Rodgers world, is a long snapper being released.
Absolutely love it. Yeah. But your question, obviously, I always circle the two Chicago Bear games every single year on the radar, right? That's a given. But the two games, there's actually two that I'm really looking forward to this year, and they're actually both in Green Bay, and that's the Chiefs and the Chargers. I think those will be two really interesting games as both those teams come to Lambeau this year. So I'm curious to see where they slot in. I'm sure week one will be a Bears or a Lions or a Vikings, a divisional game right off the bat, but Chiefs and Chargers are two games I'm really interested in this year.
Part of the reason I jumped right into the Packers is I'm really interested to see them play the Lions. I actually hope that the Lions come early in the season because I'd like to see that matchup once again. That's how we left off the season. The Lions got the last bite of Aaron Rodgers before he left Green Bay. I'd really like to see that play out. Of course, Mike. We bring you on now again. You can check him out on Twitter at MikeDobbs94. Mike, you're a Washington Commanders fan. Is there any matchup or any part of the schedule you're really hoping to see come to fruition on Thursday?
Sure. So there's not a opponent that I'm looking more to forward to facing rather than another opponent. I'm just looking forward to week one just to see Sam Howell behind center. That's pretty much the most of my anticipation because Washington has a really good skill set on offense to help Sam Howell become the best he can be. So I'm just really looking forward to seeing week one, whether it is a divisional game, could easily see it against the Cowboys or Eagles week one because they normally play the Giants later on in the season. But I am looking forward to seeing how they'll compete against the Bills. A team like the caliber of the Bills is something that intrigues me the most as well.
I'm surprised that everyone's as big as on Howell as they are. I don't understand this. This feels like tires in the mud in Washington once again.
So here's the thing, though. The thing with Howell is that he's the best bet we got right now. So obviously, you got to support who you got at quarterback at this day and age, and Sam Howell is our guy. And before his last season at North Carolina, he was the number one quarterback prospect in the draft, and he has a skill set that scouts do like. He's a great rusher. He rushed for over 800 yards his senior year of college, and in the NFL, you got to be mobile on top of throwing the ball, and he has that skill set. So we just got to see how he can play. Our offensive line is going to be a big factor into how Sam Howell is going to be as well. So you can't look back now. All the quarterback prospects are gone, and you got who you got, and Sam Howell is the guy that we got.
I completely understand, and I agree with you to a certain extent in that you're putting lipstick on a pig, and that's very Washington of you when it comes to your football team. But I honestly can't believe that there isn't a better option out there. And I don't understand why the Heineke's and the Gardner Minshew's of the world get thrown around like toys nobody wants when they win football games. Meanwhile, Sam Howell, who I don't think has anything. I'm a total seller on him. So put me down for a hater and let me be wrong later. But I feel like the Washington Commanders, like you're braving it out. I actually give you a lot of credit, Mike, because frankly, you could have given up on Washington a long time ago. I feel like what I'm really hearing is we're so close to the end of the tunnel of Dan Snyder that you're probably going to get like Caleb Williams in a year. You'll get May in a year, and therefore this Sam Howell experiment is really just a way of like getting through 2023 to what will be the glory days of 2024. Am I wrong?
So here's another thing is in regards to your Gardner Minshew and Taylor Heineke, the thing is Sam Howell, he can easily be a Taylor Heineke because who was Heineke? He was an XFL backup quarterback. Yes, he won us a lot of games. Yes, I am very appreciative of what he did in Washington. Sam Howell is a lot better athlete. He has a better arm talent than Taylor Heineke ever will be and ever was. And right now the locker room is fully behind Sam Howell, just like they were with Taylor Heineke. So there could be the same. That was the only reason of that lore with Heineke was how he had the grasp of his teammates in the locker room. So that's the only differential. Like Sam Howell, just to me, is the better quarterback than Heineke. So it was the right move to move on from him on both ends of both Heineke and Washington. But at the same time, there was reports that saying Washington was going to hold out on a quarterback this year for the potential outcome of a Caleb Williams or a Drake May. So only time will tell once again.
What did you think of that Andrew Luck news? What did you think about the story of them trying to tamper and totally pull like a snake move and try and pull some stay-at-home dad out of retirement?
Here's the thing is that, once again, who are you going to believe? Right now, the Luck's camp said that Washington did not contact anyone in Luck's circle.
But is that because that there may be implications for Luck?
Well, that's what I have no clue. But once again, it's Jim Irsay. You know that Irsay loves to.
You know there's only one owner. Like Dan Snyder's the worst owner in the NFL. Like that's obvious. But you know how much I dislike Jim Irsay. Like I am definitely out on Irsay. So I totally understand. This is like a battle of like which snake oil salesman are you going to believe?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So once again, I don't know. This will just be another like, of course, Dan Snyder like eye roll on his way out if it is true. So obviously he is not in any football shape. It was stupid and idiotic to even try to poach him or even gouge his interest. So I have no clue.
I do want to get to some of the things from the NFL schedule that are kind of more important to me, or it's really about what the 2023 schedule is going to be. And it's really fascinating because it's changing the entire dynamic of the NFL. There are a few things that are like, okay, whatever, a Black Friday game, that's fine. Like at this point, the NFL is going to try and find a way to slide itself into every possible day of the week, from September to February. That I'm not going to hate on that. We love talking football. But what really stood out to me about the changes for 2023 is this idea that CBS no longer owns the AFC and that Fox no longer owns the NFC and that every game is a free agent. And so you're going to see schedules week to week when it comes to where you watch them that are going to be really different than anything we've ever seen in NFL history. Now, I'm a big sports media buff. I worked in sports media. I love watching those things. It's fascinating to me, but I do think it impacts the fan, how they look at the game, what broadcasters they're getting. I grew up listening to Jim Nantz call AFC games. If it was Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, you knew who you were getting. If it was the Cowboys, you knew you were getting Summerall. You knew you were getting Joe Buck. And that obviously has changed. And it's something that I both like in terms of the excitement of who's going to be on a slate every week. And yet I do think you lose out on something as a fan. I think there is something nice about having the home of a conference. Now, I am also a romantic about sports in ways I'm sure others aren't. That they're like, get with the program. And by the way, Red Zone makes a lot of this obsolete because I was just watching all these games in a melting pot stew of brilliance every Sunday anyways. But it is something that I think will be lost and unfortunate to a certain point. And I'm curious to know what you guys think. Adam, I ask you, are you happy that the Packers now are going to be on the AFC more? Is that something you're excited about? Or are you going to miss Fox being kind of the home of the Packers, especially in that 4 p.m. kind of late primetime window slot?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on this one. Like, I grew up, I'll one better a little bit for you with Dick Enberg. He was always the AFC
Oh my God,
guy,
absolutely.
Right?
Big shout out.
Dick Enberg, love Dick Enberg. So he was like, you knew what you had there when the AFC was playing, right? And this, I think he's mentioned Madden and Summerall. Like, I am a little bit nostalgic with that because, you know, those were the guys that got the big games, and Fox/CBS and, you know, NBC for a while there with Michaels on Sunday Night Football or whoever it was. You know, Kornheiser and all these other guys, but the standouts, the Summeralls, the Mans, the Embergs, those guys, I really liked that. I really enjoyed that. So it's up for grabs. Week to week deal is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. I guess I lean on you. Is it more, you know, the contracts that they can make, the money that the NFL can make, right, is astronomical between CBS, Fox, and everybody else. Is this a case of, you know, now going to a full streaming service with YouTube TV and not being tied to a provider like DirecTV or a Spectrum or somebody like that? Is that why they're going to go to this week to week? Is it going to be more beneficial in the long run for them to not sign a contract with CBS and or Fox and just have the one exclusive with YouTube TV? Or, like, you know, I guess I lean on you with your background to kind of figure out why are they doing it this way.
I don't think it has anything to do with it. First of all, it does have everything to do with money, but not the way I think you're thinking of it, because I actually think this is a strategy that's been played out by one, Robert Kraft, who's been the engineer of the NFL's media strategy. He really has been the architect in the way that Jerry Jones has been the architect of merchandise and apparel for the NFL and the branding and the partnerships in that way. And part of the reason we've seen the expansion of NFL apparel just blow up is Jerry Jones's brilliance. How the NFL media has been developed over the last decade plus is Robert Kraft. His fingerprints are all over it. And I think what part of it is his desire to see streaming and to see the competition of NFL across media platforms, that being financially beneficial for the evolution of the business of football. But the other component of this is less about the media strategy, and I think more just, this is a commissioner thing, this is all 32 owners. You want the best games in front of the most people to generate the most money. So when you don't have games as free agents, and you are forced to slot a game at a certain time or with a certain network, if the AFC is owned by CBS, but there are 4 or 5 great AFC matchups, which there will be now because there are so many great quarterbacks in the AFC, well, one of those games is going to go to the C crew of the CBS team, as opposed to going to maybe the B or A crew of the Fox team. And so what it really avoids are those uneven weeks where you're like, oh, I keep saying ABC. AFC's got a bunch of great matchups and they're all on CBS, but Fox kind of has a dud. Those go away, and so it maximizes the audience, maximizes the money they can generate from advertising during that time, and that's what it's really about in terms of the money from how I evaluate it. I'm sure there are other members of the sports media community who could shed light on it even further. But that's what I think the real play is. But I think it is interesting because you no longer have the familiarity. And again, now I ask you, Michael, you again grew up watching Washington on the NFC. Both of you guys watch great franchises that have kind of a history with the networks that they come from. Are you disappointed you're going to see almost the production quality, the broadcasters, all of it? Are you going to miss the seeing Fox be the home of the Washington Commanders?
So here's my thing. I born and raised in South Florida, so I don't get those nationally broadcast Redskins/Commander games. So to me, right now, I don't really have a nostalgic feel towards any of the broadcasting.
Interesting.
Yeah. So for me, right now, Red Zone's my best friend, or unfortunately, or an illegal streaming site for the games. That's just where I'm at. The only broadcasting booth that I actually feel like enamored with that I love is Kevin Burkhardt and
Greg Olson.
Yep. So that's the only broadcasting booth that I actually love to listen to because the insight of both of them is fantastic. So other than that, I don't really have any connection to either broadcasting networks, or either broadcasting network. So to me, it's not that much of a big deal in my opinion.
We are on Twitter Spaces right now, but we're also on TikTok Live. And for those that are watching, throw in the comments section. I'd be really curious to know who's your favorite broadcaster or who's your favorite broadcast team. Michael just brought up Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olson, who have done a brilliant job. And I do think Greg Olson was kind of done dirty a little bit with how he was handled with Tom Brady signing the deal. Whether Tom Brady goes through with it or not is a separate story. But Greg Olson's done such a brilliant job, and I think deserves to be on the A crew at Fox. But Cam out there is saying still Joe Buck and Troy Aikman at ESPN. I think that's still a great take, Cam. I do love listening to the two of them. I think Troy Aikman brings a lot. I actually think Troy Aikman remains underrated somehow, despite being on an A crew for more than a decade plus. Beyond that now. So if you're watching, curious to know who are some of your favorite broadcasters in the NFL right now, or favorite broadcast teams. I still like the Sunday crew. Well, I can't say that anymore because I'm not as crazy about Tirico. But Chris Collinsworth isn't my favorite. But when it was Michael's Collinsworth, I love that tandem. Obviously, you don't get that anymore. I thought the Thursday night guys did a decent job this year. But I think I agree with you, Michael. I think outside of Joe Buck and Aikman, I thought the best were Greg Olson and Burkhardt, because as much as I love Jim Nantz, Tony Romo drives me bonkers. Like, I can't handle Tony Romo. I can't handle the jokes. Like, if he just talked football, I think he would be the best on television. But Tony Romo's jokes are like, why does he feel he needs to practice his stand-up like during the most important kick of an NFL season? Like, I don't understand what is your rhyme or reason, Tony? Like, just talk football, and you don't have to like get Jim to make a prediction on anything. So on everything rather. Like, do you guys disagree?
No, I agree. I don't. Tony Romo's first year in the booth was decent. It's been downhill since.
Yeah. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I agree with Michael as well too. With Romo, I wasn't crazy about him to begin with. Not like crazy about him now. But one question for you, and you may or may not be able to answer this, and I think you've read more on it than I have. So how are they going to work this then? Is it going to be like 2 weeks out before they put the times in these games?
No. This will all be organized. I wouldn't even be surprised if actually every game is pretty much announced with its TV partner on Thursday, except for all the games that can be flexed. And that's another big development is every game is now flexible.
It's now flex
late in the season, right? And that's what's valuable. I think also like certain primetime games throughout the season, but like, yes, you're right. I think it's like you get 2 weeks notice, which is brutal for some teams that are going to find out that like they have short rest or things are not advantageous for them like they could have planned. But to your question, I think the TV partners will pretty much be laid out except for the idea of a few games that'll be moved week to week. And even then, I think the NFL is going to get really sophisticated about which matchups it really wants down the stretch. Now that you aren't forced to put every team in prime time, and that was the last thing I was going to bring up that's a part of the changes for this upcoming year, is now not every team has to be featured in primetime. So we're not going to get that, what used to be a terrible game in Bengals-Browns. Now that actually doesn't sound that bad with Joe Burrow and Deshaun Watson. But you're not going to get that Arizona Cardinals with Kyler Murray injured, Monday night game against a Rams team that doesn't have Stafford. Like, those go away. And I actually think that's to everyone's benefit. Right, exactly. Yep. Like, that's a game you can throw on the G Crew, if there is such a thing, at CBS or Fox, and just bury it. But that is something I like because the NFL has prize fight components to it. When you get a great game of two great quarterbacks, it has a buzz to it. And when it doesn't, it does feel like a wasted opportunity. When it's a Monday night and it's just two teams that are lost, it always feels like, oh man, what am I going to do tonight? Like, sit in the dark, because there really is at times for some of us in the North, there is nothing to do in late winter and a nice football game. It's the reason we get some of the TV ratings that we do. So anyways, we talk a lot about the NFL schedule and the changes around the NFL schedule, TV schedule and such, but that isn't the main purpose of our show tonight. The main purpose is to talk fantasy football. And if you're watching on TikTok Live, you're going to be able to see on our screen, I'm actually going to bring up right now the early projections that ESPN actually just put out earlier this week around each position. We're going to talk about it. Adam, Michael, and myself are going to go around each position, the quarterbacks that are ranked, the running backs, every position, and how they're ranked in this first round for you fantasy football crazies who are already starting to scout which players to go after. Adam, Michael, I'm a zealot. I'm crazy. I have an addiction. It's called fantasy football. Now, I love auction drafts because I think snake drafts are communistic in their idea that, like, a computer gets to give someone randomly the first round, the first overall pick. That's crazy. I'm about capitalism. If you want to spend the money, you should be able to go chase the players you want. I won't dive into that rabbit hole on this particular night because I will go off on a tangent. But I am curious to know for both of you, in your first round, is it always a running back, or are you willing to take what is the equivalent of the best player on the board, the player that you think is going to get you the most points over the course of the season, even if it's not a running back? Adam, we start with you.
So disclaimer, why you know this about me, I'm not a big fantasy football guy. So I will ride your coattails on this one, and I'll just do my best that I can. But, I'm not a huge fantasy guy. But for me, I would take the guy, in my opinion, that would, be the most points from week to week. As the first overall pick, the guy that's going to be there. I guess the word I would use would be consistency. If you have a guy that's going to consistently give you a certain number of target points every week, that would be my top pick in the draft.
Michael, from your perspective, how would you play fantasy football first round?
So I'm always running back first, just because there's an abundance of receivers out there that can get you a good amount of points and not as many running backs. So I always say you got to get the best running back available, just because even with injuries, if you don't draft a running back super early and your main running back RB1 is injured, you're slim picking.
We have a question that actually came in here on TikTok Live that I want to address. That is, thoughts on Stroud and Rashee Rice, fantasy value on a draft dynasty rookie drafts. First of all, if you are going that deep, there's a meeting at some church somewhere of anonymous people that you can join around fantasy football, because that's in deep, but I'm all about it. And what I would say is, I actually think it's a nice tandem. Because I think Rice has great speed and is going to be able to get out of breaks really well. And I think that's going to be important for Stroud, who needs to get the ball out quick. Obviously, he's got a great offensive tackle in Laramie Tunsil. But if Stroud's going to be successful early in his career, I feel this always about every rookie quarterback, unless they are crazy dynamic with the ball like Lamar Jackson. It's about get the ball out quick. Just get the ball out quick. Keep your jersey clean. Stay upright. Build momentum. Build a good completion percentage. I always feel like that's the key to rookie success. So I even look for that in fantasy. I rarely go to a rookie quarterback in fantasy because they are so hit or miss. The only time I can think of doing so in the past was Cam Newton. Funny enough, I won my league that year because he was so prolific. But rarely do we see a quarterback do that in their first season. And for that reason, I would say rookie quarterbacks, unless you're in a dynasty rookie draft, crazy nut job league, I would say rookie quarterbacks for the most part I would avoid. But if you do get them, do try to find their safety blanket, their tight end, their slot wide receiver, again, who's going to get out of breaks quick, going to be that option wide receiver who all of a sudden can turn what is a simple route into a bigger gain, because that's what a rookie quarterback is going to go to over and over again. Now, shifting back to what the focal point of our conversation is going to be is these early rankings for each position in fantasy. Guys, without a doubt, the number one quarterback out there is Patrick Mahomes, and that goes without saying. But I do think for the first time, there's a bit of controversy at number 2. Josh Allen is currently ranked for ESPN at number 2, with Jalen Hurts at 3, Joe Burrow at 4, and Lamar Jackson at number 5. Interesting that Justin Fields sits just outside of there at number 6. I'll start with you, Michael, because you're the fantasy football nut. Adam will get your take on the football analysis overall. But Michael, when it comes to fantasy, do you feel like Josh Allen still deserves to have that firm hold over the number 2 quarterback position?
I'll actually go one step further. I have Josh Allen as my number 1 option.
Really?
The thing is, Josh Allen, he's finished second in quarterback last year just because I think his elbow injury prevented him from actually maintaining that level of success further down in the season. If he did not get injured, I believe he would have finished as QB1. And I'll go another step further. Jalen Hurts is my number 2.
Wow. Is that because Jalen Hurts in the red zone has proved to you that he can consistently get in the end zone?
Yes, and I also believe his passing yardage will be up from last year.
I tend to agree with you. The only reason I'm actually a little hesitant is because I feel like you're seeing and how with the DeAndre Swift move, I feel like Rashad Penny coming in, I do feel like they want to protect Jalen Hurts just a little bit. I don't know if they're going to give him the same wear and tear as last year. I still think when it comes to the end zone, he's still going to be probably that guy. But between the 20s, like those first downs, like on a 4th and 1, is it really necessary for like Jalen Hurts to be crushed? I don't know if I feel the same way this year as I did last year. But interesting that you have Josh Allen number 1 at quarterback. In part, is it because you've lost a little bit of faith in Patrick Mahomes' weapons? He's going to win. This isn't about Patrick Mahomes as a winner. This is about fantasy football. Do you feel like the lack of a Tyreek Hill, obviously he's had a year of that, but is that impacting your thinking of him as number 1 overall?
So a lot of it actually goes with my dual threat quarterback in fantasy is that I want quarterbacks that can not only pass the ball, but can consistently rush and in red zone go for the 1-2 yard touchdown QB sneaks, which is Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts continuously, those two. Patrick Mahomes, obviously you can't do wrong as your quarterback in fantasy. If he drops to me and he's a third quarterback available, I will be giddy. The thing is, as you alluded to, his weapons it's Travis Kelce and then whatever receiver he's throwing to. It could be Kadarius Toney, who could be a lot better than.
I think Toney could have a breakout year, actually. We'll get to him a little later on, but I actually like him a little bit.
Yeah, and I do believe with Pacheco, I think that they're going to be running it a little bit more than they were last year because they're getting rid of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I believe that just with everything adding up, I do value Allen and Hurts a little bit more than Mahomes. I'm not saying there's a huge gap between those. That's all like 1A, 1B, 1C. It's not 1, 2, or 3.
Adam, we now shift to you. Michael talked about Josh Allen being potentially the number 1 fantasy quarterback out there and not being Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, you guys both know I was crazy in love with the Bills' first round draft pick in Dalton Kincaid. I thought that was a home run. To your thinking as a football analyst, do you think the Dalton Kincaid addition is part of the reason we should actually feel better about Josh Allen because it could actually open up his passing options even more and make that passing game even more dynamic?
Yeah, I think so. I think Kincaid for sure will make that passing attack more dynamic, but I think Michael hit the nail on the head. Like, Mahomes to me is a clear-cut number 1. I mean, 300, 350-yard games are a dime a dozen with him, 3 touchdowns, a dime a dozen. But Michael makes a very good point. For fantasy-wise, Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, how many 1, 2, 3-yard touchdowns do they get? It's just added, rushing touchdowns. And they don't go to the backfield. They are the backfield. So I think for that regard, I think Allen and Hurts could have some value here. I think Burrow at 4, obviously, I think is pretty good. The two that stand out to me on this list, and I know, a dual threat quarterback, but between Lamar Jackson and Justin Fields, passing skills right now. Obviously, you get a lot on the ground, but I think Fields and Jackson are a little higher up on this list. I would definitely have Herbert, Lawrence, and maybe even slide Kirk Cousins up here a little bit with the offense that they had in Minnesota. But to Michael's point, like as far as fantasy goes, I agree with him. I think getting those extra 1-2 yard touchdowns between Allen and Hurts is an absolute benefit. But Mahomes does the 15-10 yard runs in as well too. But Hurts and Allen, you can't go wrong there.
Getting a couple comments here on TikTok Live in the comment section. Dustin Peacock, who's a great loyal viewer, has watched a lot during the football season, brought up how people they don't give Mahomes his flowers. They go chase other things. He produces. Once you draft him, he continues to deliver. I tend to agree. I mean, I feel like you could go draft Mahomes. One of the things I actually like to do at this point is in auction drafts, I kind of identify players that I'm just willing to get. I'm just going to spend the money. I'm going to lock them into my team. Patrick Mahomes has been that player for the last 2 years because I know what I'm going to get from him. And Josh Allen, there actually is the likelihood that there are times where he can disappear. As crazy as it sounds, he can have monster games over the course of the season. It can be great. But I feel like Patrick Mahomes is the reason he's number one is the sheer consistency. I feel like even when he doesn't have a 300-yard passing game, he goes for 3 touchdowns. The consistency is always there for me. It's why Mahomes is number one, and I wouldn't overthink it too much. I do love Dalton Kincaid joining the Bills. I think that's such a great addition. It's going to make Stephon Diggs better. It's going to open up the middle, like the seams of the defense for Allen to attack. And again, with that, it also opens up the running game. Because if you have that linebacker that's got to cover Dalton Kincaid or that safety, they're dropping back into coverage, which opens up from line of scrimmage to wherever they are. And that's what? From 5 yards now to 7, 10, maybe 12. That opens up running lanes for Josh Allen. That's what I'm excited to see. Interesting. Adam, I divert a little bit away from you. I do like Kirk Cousins getting another weapon in his passing game. But I'm not crazy about Kirk Cousins at all. I'm always going to fade him. I know fantasy is actually a decent option, but I fade Kirk Cousins in life. Where I'm going in the NFC North, rather, is Justin Fields. I love the addition of Darnell Wright, protecting Justin Fields as a passer. And guess what he has now? A number one receiver. DJ Moore, paired with Justin Fields for a full season. Love that. I'm not crazy about Chase Claypool. I think they probably gave up a little bit more than he was worth, and they realize that now. But getting DJ Moore, I love that addition. I want to see Justin Fields as a passer. I know what he can do as a runner. But when it comes to fantasy, if he can make a Justin Hurts kind of step up as a passer, he could be a top 3 fantasy quarterback this year. That's how good Justin Fields is on the ground. That's what he could continue to deliver. Again, he's learning the offense for a second season in Chicago. If they protect him and he has a number one receiver like DJ Moore healthy, I love Justin Fields. Keep your eyes on him too, because depending on what kind of league you draft him, if you're in a snake league, he might go a little bit earlier than he should, because there'll be that one Bears fan in your league, or there's one guy who's kind of high on them like myself who probably take him a little bit early. But if you're in an auction draft league, he may fall a little bit because people may be concerned about the Chicago Bears as a team. I wouldn't feel that way. I actually think he's going to probably be underpriced, and you could get him at good value, given that he will probably have, I think, the fantasy stats of a Jalen Hurts. I think that's how big a leap he could take. Now that the Bears were so smart and built that offensive line a little bit better, we're going to shift now a little bit further away from the quarterback conversation, and we'll move towards the backfield. The position that most people care about the most, running back. What's interesting is Austin Eckler is ranked number 1 by ESPN, despite the fact that he wants a trade and he wants out of Los Angeles. Another interesting part is they brought in Kellen Moore, who's famous for being a pass-first offensive coordinator. Michael, we'll start with you. Do you like Austin Eckler being the number 1 running back according to ESPN, or would you put someone else there at the top?
So it all really does depend on what you're playing. Is it PPR, half PPR, or just standard points? With PPR, you can easily make a a case for Eckler to be your number one back because he is not the rushing threat that you think of a NFL standard running back. He is a pass catching back. So if it's full PPR, you can't go wrong with Eckler because he is a touchdown and PPR machine. But personally, I think Christian McCaffrey is still your clear-cut number one in all standards of the game.
I tend to agree with you, and part of the reason I feel that way is I like what scheme Christian McCaffrey is in far more. I feel like there are games Austin Eckler can be targeted, and it turns into a very pass-happy game for Justin Herbert, and Austin Eckler kind of shrinks. I feel like no matter what, Kyle Shanahan is going to get Christian McCaffrey involved in the 49ers offense, which makes me feel a little bit better. The only concern I have is his injury history. Adam, do you think Christian McCaffrey can play enough of a NFL regular season to justify him being drafted this high? Or do you feel like he is the classic, we project as a fantasy owner what he's done in the past onto this year, like a lot of people did with Derrick Henry last year, where you're drafting him in the first round too high, but he isn't going to be able to deliver what he did the previous season?
Well, yeah, I think it's the latter. I think that dual threat, obviously, he's probably the best dual threat back right now in the league that can be used to that advantage, but it's injuries, right? Injury to Carolina, injuries last year. So, yes, what he can do and what he can project is huge, but can he stay healthy? And looking at this list, it's a no-brainer right down the list. McCaffrey injuries, Taylor, Barkley, Henry, Pollard. You were right down the list. Delvin Cook missed some time last year. Mixon. I guess in my eyes, if you draft a running back, high in the draft, man, injury prone is such a high probability with some of these guys. You got to be really careful. I mean, Jonathan Taylor is, with him coming back from injury, they used him so much last year or the year before, you just wear him down, So these running backs, I guess my question would be is, do you weigh the reward of a dual-threat quarterback like McCaffrey getting yourself a lot of points versus the injury status with him? I guess that lean on you two guys. That as a novice fantasy guy, that my question is the risk worth the reward versus injury versus what you can get out of a weekly basis of points?
Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I say to me, I got to take the risk just because, as I alluded to before, that it's very top heavy in fantasy when it comes to running backs. So if your guy gets injured, yeah, you're screwed. But if not, you can be running away with the championship if you draft well.
If you draft the guy of the year, you can win the league. That can be enough sometimes. If you draft the guy who just goes off week after week, he can carry you throughout a season. And there are leagues that are won, especially, by the way, the weaker leagues where you're playing against some people who are adults. You can absolutely win because there are people who don't know how to put together a full roster that can compete with one guy who just dominates. That said, and to Adam, to your question, the one thing I would say is, yes, I would go after a McCaffrey, but I'd build in some insurance policies. I'd look to get Deebo Samuel. I'd make sure I draft Christian McCaffrey's backup. I want to make sure that I'm stacking my bench and maybe my wide receivers with 49ers as well. More to the Deebo Samuel because he can fill in that McCaffrey role, so that if he gets hurt and all of a sudden you lose out on McCaffrey the name, you're actually still picking up the San Francisco 49ers production that he would have accounted for. And that's what you're really caring about. Do you care about, this goes to the old Jerry Seinfeld joke of, are you rooting for a player or are you rooting for laundry? In fantasy football, it's more you're rooting for the player or you're rooting for a scheme or you're rooting for production. I'm really rooting for the 49ers running game or the 49ers dynamic offense. And that's where if I do target Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel to me has to be someone you go get. And if you're in an auction draft, it may mean you spend more. If you're in a snake draft, this is where you can get caught. Because what often happens is someone drafts Christian McCaffrey, he's going to go early, so this may not happen with him, but it happens with other teammates where someone drafts one player and it almost reminds everyone in the league of oh, I like that offense too. I should go after a player on that offense. And all of a sudden you almost have a run on a certain team in a snake draft, and that can sometimes work against you when you want to build in some of that insurance policy. But I think Christian McCaffrey is worth the risk. Part of the reason I say that too is I think he's going to play so well behind Trent Williams in another year. But the only problem is, if I am looking for drawbacks on Christian McCaffrey, Who's the quarterback? Sam Darnold? Is anyone fearing Sam Darnold right now? Is it Trey Lance? Like, who's the quarterback? Brock Purdy? Is he healthy yet? So that is something I'm concerned about. Michael, is there reason for you to avoid McCaffrey because of the quarterback situation in San Fran?
Honestly, no. Like later on in the season, they even used McCaffrey as a quarterback some plays. Like it just shows you how like versatile McCaffrey is in the Shanahan offense. So I'm not too worried about that. I just think that if obviously the big if is the injuries, if he can sustain health throughout the season, I think he's the number one guy. He's a home run hitter.
One thing I wanted to call out in this list, Bijan Robinson is third on this list. If you're watching on TikTok Live, you can see the rookie running back. Yes, he is going to have a good year if he stays healthy. But really, the Atlanta Falcons offense, this isn't Jonathan Taylor entering the league and being behind the Colts offensive line of that time, which was loaded. Do we really believe that Bijan Robinson is the third best running back in fantasy? Is he? Really? Michael?
Here's the thing with Bijan is that they did not draft him not to be their workhorse, and I do believe he is going to be a lot better in the pass-catching abilities as well. So I do think he's going to get a lot of reps. He could be what...
Even with Tyler Algier, like, you think that...
Well, that's why they drafted Bijan so early, is to replace a lot of Algier's production. And the thing is that I view what the Falcons are going to do with Bijan, what the Steelers tried to do. The Steelers tried to do last year. The thing is, Bijan's. I think he's a stud, so I don't think you can go wrong. I just think 3 is way too high. He could be a 9, 10, maybe 11. But yeah, 3 is just way too high for me. I see that he could be a productive back in the league. 1,200 yards, could be bordering on 10 touchdowns. But in PPR, the pass catching is what I could see why he's getting rated a lot higher than he is.
First of all, we're getting some comments here on TikTok Live. Phil and Carter, I completely agree with you guys. I actually think this list of running backs isn't really that good. Again, this list comes from ESPN. This is one of their later lists. Kind of surprised with their rankings, who they have. I feel like ESPN right now has like a love affair with Bijan Robinson, which is both will be justified by his production over his rookie year. I do think he's going to be a stud, but I do think it's a little too quick to be like number 3 running back in fantasy football right now. It's a little too fast for me. Phil, you bring up an interesting one with Ramondre Stevenson at 13. And Damian Harris, gone from New England. You know the Patriots are still going to be a run-first offense. They're not. They haven't given Mac Jones nearly enough weapons in the passing game for me to think somehow that's going to tilt towards a pass-first offense. It's Bill O'Brien, so it's going to be run the ball, try to shorten the third down situation to like a 3rd and 4 or better, and that's how you're going to eat up clock, eat up yardage, and that's how the Patriots are going to win. Ramondre Stevenson could be a really good pick. Again, I wonder about his durability if he's not in a tandem back situation, but I really like him. I think he could be a really good pickup for somebody. The other one I wanted to bring up, and Adam, I bring him up for you because you're going to see plenty of him this year in the NFC North, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs. The Detroit Lions have made a bet on him moving on from DeAndre Swift. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to fill into that role. Obviously, they also got David Montgomery, who will kind of play that Jamal Williams role. But Jahmyr Gibbs, in run and pass situations, he might be someone to target as a steal in fantasy. Do you think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have decent production for the Lions this year?
See, I just never was a big Jahmyr Gibbs guy, and I think Detroit took him way too early in this draft. And actually looking at this list, some of the guys he's ahead, obviously Kamara, I know he's been up and down, but
Breece Hall, some of the guys in some of the people in this chat are giving hell that Breece Hall isn't ranked higher.
I mean, I get he came off the injury, but still, I mean, what he showed, what he could do. Pacheco in Kansas City, Sanders is going to be in Carolina now. We talked about a rookie quarterback's going to rely on his running back. He's going to get some production. So to me, Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm not really sure. I'm with you on the Bijan way too high, but I'm also with Jahmyr Gibbs here being way too high. I'm not saying he is a talent and he can't be a productive player, but right off the bat, putting him back there, I think that his ceiling is going to be set a little bit too high, or what the expectation is going to be for him in Detroit.
We're getting good conversation in the comments section here on TikTok Live as people are curious about Breece Hall being 18th on this list. The only reason that I can justify Breece Hall being there, beyond the injury, everyone's aware of that, but I think there will be enough time for him to, even if he's gone for the first few weeks of the season, for him to be a contributor for your fantasy team. It's the Jets' offensive line. The difference between the Lions' offensive line and the Jets is pretty substantial. The Lions are a top 5 offensive line. I know some people kind of throw shade on the Lions at times. You can't do that anymore. They've built well in the trenches on offense, and it's one of the reasons I may like Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more than Hall. Not just that he's going to be in that dynamic run and receiver role, but it's also because he's behind some big boys in there, and I feel like who are consistent, who have lined up together consistently. So for reasons that speak to the offensive line, that's why I like Jahmyr Gibbs maybe a little bit more than Breece Hall. Breece Hall's talent is there, but the Jets not getting another tackle, that has me a little bit concerned. Pacheco is one I'm curious about because I loved him as a rookie running back. I don't know if I feel the same way about him now. I think he's certainly going to get his opportunities, but I think more teams are aware of him. I'm curious to know what Miles Sanders does as I kind of slide down this list a little bit. Him in Carolina, what he's going to do with Bryce Young certainly has my eye. I love DeAndre Swift in Philadelphia. So, like him being at 28 right now, that's a player I absolutely would target. He wouldn't be my RB1. He would be my second running back. But I think DeAndre Swift could have a really good year in Philadelphia. So where he is on this list, don't overlook that. But when it comes to fantasy, I'm gonna bring Michael. I'm gonna bring you in on this one. I'm really big on looking at offensive lines. You can hear it in how I talk about the Lions. I really care about finding a team that no matter who the running back is, I know I'm going to get good production out of that offensive line blocking. Do you look towards offensive lines, or is it purely the talent of the running back?
It's a mixture of both. It really does depend on the running back themselves because obviously you look at Derrick Henry, offensive line play might not be the best, but he's just a freak animal that is physical at the line himself. So he will easily get the 2 yards before contact, and then he's a great yards after carry. But when you do talk about offensive line play, like Seattle Seahawks come to mind, like Kenneth Walker the third, he's going to be a stud. But at the same time, they drafted Zach Charbonnet early, which I thought was pretty shocking because you do have Kenneth Walker. But at the same time, if Walker does go down with an injury, you just plug in Zach Charbonnet, and I believe he would just give you the same amount of production as Kenneth Walker, probably less. But at the same time, that can be a factor of offensive line play being very beneficial to the player themselves.
I totally agree with you. We're going to transition now and jump into wide receivers for a couple minutes. And we obviously start with the man at the top, and deservedly so, because he has proven now multiple seasons that he is, I think in all our estimation right now, he is the king of the wide receiver class, and that is Justin Jefferson. Michael, my only question to you is there any reason, how big does a league have to be for you to take Justin Jefferson in the first round?
Oh, not at all. He's the only receiver I would justify taking in the first round. But at the same time, for me personally, I would be a little bit skeptic taking him top 4. But if I don't like any of the running backs that early, I'll take him easily in the first round. So I'm not it's not so far-fetched for me to draft a wide receiver in the first round if his name is Justin Jefferson, or even maybe late in the first round and then Jamar Chase. But other than those two, I wouldn't touch a wide receiver until the second round.
Yeah, I probably feel the same way, but I really don't. I think Justin Jefferson is worthy of a first-round pick, but my personal strategy, I always go running back. If I'm in a snake draft, for me, it's always running back with the first pick, running back with the second pick. That's just pure habit for me.
I'm right there. Yeah, I'm right there with you. Like last year, I did running back, then I did Tyreek Hill, which paid off dividends for me in the second round. But that was the first time I ever did a running back receiver. But I typically am the running back, receiver.
And the reason I say that is because I'm the guy. You guys know I'm a big sports guy, so I'm always scouting. I'm always looking at college football players and thinking about them in fantasy. And a lot of my friends, they don't follow college football the same way, so they're unaware of some of these rookies. You can find some good rookie running backs, but I always find that those guys really play well from weeks like 1 through 10, maybe 1 through 12, but that's the length of the college football season. And that's when a Dameon Pierce or a Kenneth Walker III, they kind of fall off. But wide receivers don't have that same problem, one. And two, the way offenses are now, a rookie wide receiver can jump in there and do really well. So someone like a Chris Olave last year, that's somebody who I targeted, who I love. And running back, I need someone who's going to be there from week 1 through week 18, who's just going to be consistent and deliver. That's why I double down on running back in the first 2 rounds, feeling like I can steal some talent later on with some rookies. Jackson Smith-Njigba is someone I have on my list. Adam, do you think Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be a offensive rookie of the year candidate? Do you think he's worth putting that kind of investment in as maybe a steal target in a fantasy draft?
Well, he's obviously getting put in a good situation here with Metcalf and Lockett. And whether Metcalf and Lockett, that opens up them more. If Jigba starts getting some downfield threats, I think he could definitely be up for Offensive Rookie of the Year. But I'll go back to it again. Quentin Johnston, to me, was my favorite wide receiver in this draft, and I think he got in a perfect situation with the Chargers. And that wide receiving group that he has, I think he really can stretch the field. And with his endurance that he had over at TCU, to me, he's the leader in the clubhouse for rookie wide receivers.
Wow, it's funny you say that. That isn't where I was going to go. I was going to go Jackson Smith-Njigba as either number 1 or, and you're going to hear me talk about this guy a lot over the next few months as someone you should target in fantasy, Zay Flowers. Because finally, Lamar Jackson has a talented wide receiver that they can throw all over the field, who's incredible getting out of breaks. They don't just have Mark Andrews anymore. I think Zay Flowers is a steal. He is my Chris Olave of this year as a guy you're going to get later in the draft who could prove, who could pay you back huge dividends as a fantasy owner. Interesting that you go Quentin Johnston. I like him in 2 ways. I know Justin Herbert has a big arm, and I know Keenan Allen and Mike Williams get hurt, so Johnston's going to have plenty of opportunities in that passing game. Plus, Kellen Moore, you know he's going to bring a big passing offense to the Chargers, but I'm just not as big on him as you are. I wasn't in the draft. I'm not now. Give me a quick sales pitch. Like, is it his speed? Do you like the height? Like, is that what it's about? Or do you just think the combination of OC and wide receivers around him plus quarterback makes it like a perfect fit?
Yeah, I think, well, quarterback for sure. I mean, Justin Herbert to me is a top tier quarterback in this league. It's just getting better. But the 2 things, like you mentioned, injuries have been the Chargers' Achilles heel at wide receiver this year. So I think him stepping in, his production is going to go up. But I just love the way that when TCU were in the high-paced offense, you know, the endurance that you have to have as a wide receiver to not only just run the short routes, intermediate routes, but the deep routes and stay the entire game. So to me, I think that he can do short, middle, or long, and that just makes the Chargers more dynamic. But his production is going to go up with the injuries because you know what's going to happen. One or two of those guys are going to get hampered, and he's going to step right in for production. So that's why I like him a little bit. But real quick, not to get away from this real fast, but one guy I want to highlight on your list, Wyatt, was down number 26. Very sneaky, Calvin Ridley. I think a lot of people coming back this year with Jacksonville. Yep. So Calvin Ridley, to me, is a guy that could have huge production this year after being off last year.
That's such a great call. I feel the exact same way. I both love that you brought it up and hate that you brought it up because I was going to bring it up because you're totally right. That is a steal. He is going to have a monster year. You already know that, first of all, he's motivated. Second of all, you know the Jaguars' offense is great from a passing perspective and is only going to get better. They know they're going to get another year of Doug Peterson. I love everything about what Jacksonville's doing, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And Calvin Ridley, I did not give him enough credit in Atlanta because I was just kind of fading the Falcons at the time overall. He was outstanding statistically, and from a fantasy owner standpoint, he could be one of the best picks of this year if he can stay healthy. I love what he can do. And if you look at the AFC South rather, is there one good secondary in that division? He's playing 6 games against the Texans secondary, the Titans secondary, and a Colts secondary that doesn't have Gilmore anymore, that is far weaker than it was a year ago. So for a number of reasons, Calvin Ridley could get loose in one of those games. I love what you just said. I'm really high on him. I want to shift away from him for a moment to another wide receiver. This one I'm high on. I drafted him last year again. It went to my rookie strategy, and it ended up paying off. I'm curious to know if year 2 will be as successful. Obviously, he's got a brand new weapon. Michael Garrett Wilson. We're going to hear a lot about him. A lot of fantasy owners are going to talk about him, are going to target him. He'll probably go earlier in the draft than he probably should, just because everyone's going to be so high on Aaron Rodgers. Do you think Garrett Wilson's ready to be a top 10 fantasy wide receiver this year?
Yeah, 100%. I can see him as the number 10, maybe even 9 or 8 level type of receiver in fantasy. It will only help his production with getting Aaron Rodgers behind center. I think last year proved to you it didn't matter who the quarterback was for him, but when he actually gets a consistent quarterback play, and Aaron Rodgers being one of the best, I think that will only pay dividends for him.
Phil brings it up in the chat. Love Wilson, but not his average draft position. I totally agree with you, Phil, and I could not agree with you more. Great point by Phil, one of the viewers on TikTok Live, as we're broadcasting now on both Twitter Spaces and on TikTok Live, as well as on YouTube. And to your point, Phil, I think Garrett Wilson is going to have a great year, but I don't think he's actually going to be accurately valued in the draft. I think there are certain teams where you're going to get a fan of that team in the draft, and they're going to love the Jets, and they're going to draft him too early, or there's going to be someone who's just a bit too keen to take Garrett Wilson too quick, and that's why he'll go a bit too high in an auction draft or in a snake draft. And it's too bad, because I think he's going to have a good year. I'd love to get him on my team, but I almost feel like he's going to be a bait. If you do an auction draft, for those who don't do it, you nominate a player, and then everyone bids, obviously. And there are players I like to put out there almost as like chum, to get some of the other players in my league to overspend on players so that they have less capital to go after the players that I really want. Garrett Wilson might be one of those kind of dummy players up there I put up for auction this year, because I feel like people are just going to overspend on him. But Adam, I put Garrett Wilson up against another player, and I'll ask you, who do you think is going to end up having a better year statistically? Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets or Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions? In this ranking, if you're watching on TikTok Live and on YouTube, Amon-Ra St. Brown is ranked, according to ESPN, as the number 8 fantasy wide receiver going into the season. Garrett Wilson is 11th. Adam, I ask you, which wide receiver do you think is going to have more production this year?
Well, to me, I would lean St. Brown. And the reason I would lean St. Brown is because I think Detroit's going to have to score more points. Their defense isn't as good as the Jets. And I think they're going to have to spread it around and do it a little bit what they did this year, score 30, 35, 40 points a game. I think Garrett Wilson's going to be a good weapon for Aaron Rodgers, no question about that. But like you mentioned, a little bit of question in the offensive line. They might rely on the running game a little bit if Breece Hall comes back healthy. It'd be curious to see what Rodgers does. Rodgers spread the ball around a lot last year. I know we had some injuries, but we didn't have any receiver over 800 yards receiving for the year. Garrett Wilson was just over 1,100 yards, which, Garrett Wilson probably is more talented than any receiver we had in the Packers last year, even with Watson and Dobbs' emergence. But I think because of Detroit's offense and what they have to do, because their defense isn't going to be there just yet, I think St. Brown's probably going to get more production than Wilson this year, because the Jets defense is pretty good, and the Jets might be maintaining a lead instead of having to score 30 points to win.
What's challenging for me on this one, and Phil brings it up in the chat, Jameson Williams is suspended, obviously, for gambling or whatever he was involved in. And so Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't going to have him on the field for the early part of the year. Once again, didn't have him last year due to injury. But I actually like when a stud wide receiver has another good wide receiver on the other side. I know that may impact his targets, but I actually feel like that opens him up for greater yardage because there's less coverage there, obviously. So I actually think Amon-Ra St. Brown, while he may get more targets early on, he'll get more coverage as well. So he might benefit, Phil, from getting Jameson back in the lineup. I do like Goff having that continuity with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Rodgers is obviously going to have to find that groove with Garrett Wilson. Part of me would say this. I don't think I'm going to draft Garrett Wilson. I think he's going to be too expensive. What I really want to do is I really want to avoid him in the draft, and then I want to go find him in a trade. And come like early October, mid-October, I want to go trade for Garrett Wilson, because come week 7, week 6, that's when Rodgers and Wilson should have unbelievable chemistry. And if I'm getting the two of them on the back half of the year where they go chase a playoff run, that could be where I get great production early on in the year. Obviously, we have to see what the schedule is. We have to see if there are games early on against good defenses or bad defenses. That obviously will play a factor. But I think Garrett Wilson is a good player to target in a trade. If you draft him, you'll probably overspend, or you'll draft him too early in a snake draft. But you're going to want him from weeks 8 through 18, because once Aaron Rodgers finds a number one wide receiver, you know he overthrows to him. Devontae Adams, please stand up and testify. We know that's what happens. So I think that's a great opportunity there. We continue our conversation about wide receivers. And Michael, I'm curious to know what you have to say about the Miami Dolphins. Unbelievable speed. Jalen Waddle is as dynamic as Tyreek Hill is. He's just at a different point in his career. But can we trust Tua Tagovailoa, or is that an offense that, once again, you will overspend to get the talent, but you won't get the production because of factors that are outside of your control?
Yeah, so the thing with both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle is that they did prove to you games without Tua that they can still be productive, whether it is as a vertical threat or as a screen receiver. So they can easily, in PPR, they can get you the points that you need. But it all does depend on Tua's health. And if Tua's healthy, those two can both be top 10 wide receivers in fantasy. So I think that regardless if it's Skylar Thompson throwing them the ball, who obviously is not going to be anyone good, but at the same time, if it's Skylar Thompson or Tua, I think that you can't go wrong with drafting Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle.
I don't know why, by the way, the Dolphins haven't invested in a better backup. Like,
they got Mike White. They got Mike White.
Okay. I like Mike White.
I mean, it's better than Skylar Thompson.
No. I like Mike White. I actually think that could be a good signing.
It's better than Teddy Bridgewater as well. So the thing is, too, though, is that when you got both Hill and Waddle as both vertical threats, they can easily get you those points that you need on one catch as well. So I think that you can't go wrong with either of them. It's just the thing is, are you going to overdraft them? Right now,
the answer
Hill
is yes.
Going to be yeah. Well, the thing is, Hill's going to be a top five receiver. I don't think you can go wrong with that. Waddle is another story. Are you going to draft himself as a top 5 wide receiver? Maybe not. But in the 10 receiver range, I'll be comfortable drafting Waddle.
I have to tend to agree with you in terms of I think they're going to be overpriced. I'm not going to go after them. I'm just saying that now. If any of the guys who are in my league, I'm just telling you now, I'm going to avoid them. We talked about Calvin Ridley. I feel like that's a great steal. Keep your eye on him. Keep your eye on, I'm also going to say keep your eye on Michael Thomas. If he can ever get on the field, stay healthy, Derek Carr being down there in New Orleans, he could be someone, people have just forgotten about him. So again, there are certain players that I like to take a risk on. We're just talking about fantasy football strategy overall. I like going after rookies because a lot of my friends don't know about college football players. So a guy enters the league, they don't really know how talented he is. You get him at a good price or good value if you're in a snake draft. And all of a sudden, he goes off and everyone's like, hey, who's this DK Metcalf guy? And it's like, yeah, he was kind of a good player at Ole Miss. So something you want to consider. And I certainly have my eye on Zay Flowers. That was someone I brought up earlier. Jackson Smith and Jigba is someone I also have my eye on. But I feel like I actually may like Zay Flowers more. And the reason is I think the Ravens need Zay Flowers to be successful more than the Seahawks need Jackson Smith and Jigba to be successful. So that opportunity, I think they need a stud wide receiver, so they are going to force the ball. They're going to design schemes around him. I think that's a good opportunity. I do want to shift to go ahead.
Real quick, can I give 2 rookie receivers that I think
go for it? Love it. Go ahead.
I think Josh Downs with the Colts and Jaden Reed with the Packers.
Interesting. Interesting. Adam, do you have any rookie wide receivers you want to call out?
I think Jane Reed could be a good receiver for us because he needs a slot guy, and Cobb was 95 years old, so he wasn't going to get it done. Obviously, he's with Aaron now in New York, but I think Jane Reed is a really good guy to slot in there. And I mentioned Quentin Johnston. I do like him. Josh Downs, I like him a lot. I'm just not sure if the production at quarterback is going to be there just yet with the progression with Richardson there. So we'll have to see how that goes. But I do like Josh Downs as well. But Quentin Johnston is my number one guy of this draft. I like Zay Flowers, but Lamar Jackson, I just don't trust his passing ability yet to get that done. Flowers is dynamic, but we'll see because now he's going to have a dynamic wide receiver. So we'll see if Lamar can get it done. One question for you real quick as we're just blowing through these wide receivers. We're talking about guys we like. My question to you is Godwin and Evans. Do you stay away from them now because Baker's a quarterback?
Yes.
Tommy Terrific is gone. Right? I mean, that would be my guess, right?
Not just that. I don't like the offense. So there are a couple of things for me when I'm looking at wide receivers. And Michael, we'll get to your take on this in just a second. I really care about quarterback. I really care about offensive line. I care about it for running backs. I care about it for wide receivers. I want to pick a top 5 offense, and I want to get the best players on those offenses. And whether it's Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask or whoever it is, Tampa Bay is in a rebuilding process, and so I don't trust their offense. I don't trust their passer. I don't trust their offensive line. And so again, I'm going to use Mike Evans and Godwin as auction bait. When I'm in my draft auction, I'm going to put them up for nomination so that a couple of my friends go and spend money on them and have less money in their purse to go chase the wide receivers or running backs that I really want. And that's part of my strategy, is to get my opponent to spend the money during an auction draft so that I can get the players I want with the funds that I have. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin will absolutely be 2 of those players this year. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, so the thing was with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin is that I actually would stay away from them as well, just not only because of the quarterback production, but the inconsistency in games from both receivers and the health injuries with Godwin. It's just, you can't rely on Baker Mayfield as well throwing them the ball. Mike Evans is just too inconsistent for me throughout the years. He could get you one game with 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, but the next game he'll give you 40 yards and 2 catches. So I would stay away from them.
That finishes our conversation on wide receivers. We're going to touch on tight ends for just a brief moment. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, and this absolutely falls under my previous notes on wide receivers, but I love going after rookies. I love rookie talent because my friends didn't know who Kyle Pitts was. Now, Kyle Pitts was very hit or miss, but you could see the talent. And when you get somebody in a draft like Dalton Kincaid going to Josh Allen, I know Dawson Knox is there, but I'm going to be really curious during training camp, during preseason. I want to see how Dalton Kincaid gets into the offense. He may not be someone who goes off in September, and you may draft him and some people may go, hey, that was a reach. But come again, late October, November, December, keep your eye on Dalton Kincaid. I think he's going to be a great steal for those that are looking at tight end position. I think he's someone to look at. The first player I'm going to talk about, though, Adam, will talk about it with you first. Darren Waller. He got traded from Las Vegas to New York. He joins Daniel Jones in the Brian Daboll offense. How do you feel about Darren Waller, his injury history? Are you avoiding him altogether, or do you think he could have a really productive year in New York?
I think he could have a productive year in New York. It's surrounding him now with the running game. I know Daniel Jones, again, much like we talk about with the dual threat passing needs to improve, but I think Brian Daboll's going to scheme with him. They got a receiver in the draft that they needed. They got Barkley coming back. I think they're starting to put pieces on offense together there to get it done. So I think Daboll being there can really use Waller to his advantage. Just like you mentioned, it's just the health factor of it. But I think if he can stay healthy, I think Daboll schemes him enough where he can be very productive this season.
What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, to me, this trade was a low risk, high reward for the Giants just based on Waller's injury. If he's healthy, he's going to be a top 5 tight end in the league, and it pains me to say that, obviously, but that was a great pick for the Giants, and he fits in perfectly with that offense. So it all really does depend on the health issues with Waller. And the thing with tight end in fantasy is that I don't overdraft tight ends unless your name is Travis Kelce.
Yep.
So I'm totally fine with waiting for tight end because for me, if you're not getting Kelsey or Andrews, I'm fine with getting a Dallas Goedert or an Evan Ingram later in the round. So to me, I just typically stay away from drafting tight ends high. So if Waller's there in a later round, I'll snag him.
Couldn't agree with you more, Michael. And to that idea, Travis Kelce, I will treat like a top tier wide receiver. His production is there. The chemistry with Mahomes is there. He gets in the red zone. He also is one of those players, and again, this happens for only maybe like 10 or 12 guys in the entire league, where he can have a game and single-handedly like win you that week. Like he can get like 35 points in a week, and there aren't too many players who can do that. So I treat Travis Kelce differently. But for tight ends, I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of the reasons I actually like going after rookies. So like Michael Mayer and Dalton Kincaid, I like both of those guys because they're just going to be decent targets. They're going to fill a role. They'll probably, again, be cheap or have good draft position, average draft position if you're in a snake. But, I mean, Evan Ingram for Jacksonville, that's someone I would look at. I always will consider, to your point, a Dallas Goedert. But I'm really not as high on the tight end position once you get outside Travis Kelce. I care way more about running backs. I want to stock up on running backs. And I feel even more that way about wide receivers because wide receivers are going through this transformation where they're being treated more and more like running backs and how they're being used in some of these offenses, whether it's in jet sweeps or in screens or other ways. So for so many reasons, I really like loading up on those two positions, and it means I'm devaluing the tight end position just slightly, not so much in the production, but in where I draft them. Michael Mayer with Jimmy Garoppolo fitting into that McDaniels offense could be an unbelievable fit. Again, you may not get great production out of that player in September, but if you're willing to hold on until later in the season, that could be a really strong pick. It might be a draft and stash kind of situation for some of these tight ends. I do kind of have my eye on Pat Freiermuth. I really liked him last year. He had good production, felt he had really good chemistry with Pickett. I'd like to see him take that next leap where he becomes even more of a weapon down the middle of the field. He's big, he's physical, but I'd like to see him just generate a little bit more production. He could be someone I target. David Njoku, that's another one. He's really talented, and another year with Deshaun Watson might be someone to keep your eye on. In the comments section, Phil brings up Laporta, seems worth a mention as well for rookies. Yeah, he went higher than I expected. Adam, what do you think about the tight ends with Jordan Love? Is there either one of them that you would consider drafting this year?
So Luke Musgrave was our first tight end picked at Oregon State. But this kid, the second kid we took out of South Dakota State, just Tucker Kraft, I actually think he might be the better of the two. We took him in round 3. He's 6'4". He runs a 4.69 40. And I didn't know this about him, but apparently Alabama, he had a full ride to Alabama, and he turned him down twice to stay at South Dakota State. So if you're turning down Nick Saban to stay there, he must have some pretty good talent. So South Dakota State obviously is one of the best teams there in D2. But this Tucker Kraft kid actually, I think, to me, might be the better option over Luke Musgrave, who was picked earlier from Oregon State. But I think surrounding Jordan Love with as much, as he can is the best thing to do, like we was talking about these young quarterbacks. So I think that Tucker Kraft could be a guy, maybe not right off the start, but maybe halfway through the year, you might start hearing his name more in Green Bay.
To bring up a tight end that I would keep my eye on, Michael Hayden Hurst. He moved. He's no longer with the Bengals. Now he's with Carolina. Bryce Young. I actually trust Bryce Young more than I would a lot of other rookie quarterbacks. And with a tight end like Hayden Hurst, I feel like that could be a really good duo. Again, not for drafting Bryce Young, but for drafting Hayden Hurst. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I actually do like Hayden Hurst a little bit in Carolina. Obviously, you got to surround a young quarterback with an above-average pass-catching tight end, and Hayden Hurst is just that. He proved it in Cincinnati. But another tight end that I'm actually very interested in is Greg Dulcich in Denver with Russell Wilson. How Russell Wilson's going to produce the next season, it all depends because last year was atrocious. But Dulcich is a very, very high upside tight end that I am keeping my eye on.
What about Noah Fant in Seattle? If we have Jigba coming there, they shored up the offensive line a little bit through the drafts. Does Noah Fant see more options now?
It's a great call, Adam, because I love Noah Fant. Like, I'm so high on him as a player. But my only concern is, how do you feed all of those mouths in that offense? And because now that they have 3 stud wide receivers, like Noah Fant might be a good like tight end number 2 to draft, put on your bench, and maybe you put him in when someone has a bye week or if someone gets hurt. But I don't know if I can trust him as a tight end number 1 on my team, just because, again, there are so many mouths to feed in Seattle. Michael, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I agree with that. You do have to look at how many other receivers are on that team, or even running backs that can catch in the backfield. So it really does depend. You got to look at the team themselves, because when you look at like a Cole Kmet, is that going to be worth picking? Might be now, even though they did get DJ Moore. They have Chase Claypool, but he's not really that productive. But at the same time, me personally, I will stay away from Noah Fant just because the production hasn't been there, even with his time in Denver. I get you can talk about quarterback play as well. But to me, I'm always not high on tight ends in fantasy, as I mentioned. But to me, they could be interchangeable with the tight ends, especially later in the season. You always got to look at the opponents. How are they going to be with how many points do they give up against the tight ends? So I always later in the season like to stash a few guys, or always just add and drop. So it really does depend. Like Mike Gesicki, how is he going to be in New England now? It really does depend on the quarterback play, because there's not many other threats on offense to take the ball away. But it really does depend on just how many offensive threats they have on that offense.
This has been a fun conversation. We've gone through quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight ends for fantasy football. It is the first episode of what will be many around the fantasy football draft hype. Appreciate all you guys joining us. Make sure you go to our website, buttfumblesports.com. There's a link in our bio if you're watching on TikTok Live. Hit that link in our bio, takes you right to our website. Sign up for our free newsletter. Check out our content. Both of these guys contribute content. And while you're there, you can go check out our store and check out some of our NFL-themed merch, including a Mr. Irrelevant shirt featuring Brock Purdy, as well as Deebo Samuel, Jones on Jones Crime, the butt punt for all of those fans of the most famous moment in butt to punt history. And of course, we also have Josh Allen hurdling over a Chiefs defender. So go check out our website, buttfumblesports.com. The link is in the bio. You can also check out our content, a lot of blog material. So go check that out if you're watching on TikTok Live. The link is in the bio. Go hit that link. Takes you right to our website. Appreciate all of you guys joining us for tonight's NFL show. We are live every single Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We talk NFL, all the news, notes, everything around the NFL, so that you guys are both up to date and you can hear our takes throughout the season. Definitely want to give a big shout out to our contributors tonight. At Spotter AJ, you can find him on Twitter. Adam, you did a great job tonight as always. You can find his content again on our website. That's at Spotter AJ on Twitter. And also want to give a big shout out to Michael. You can find him at MikeDobbs94 on Twitter. Mike, appreciate you joining us tonight. That's our show for the evening. If you want to check out the show, if you missed anything, you can find it on YouTube. It'll be posted in just a little bit. You can find all our content across all of our platforms. Make sure you follow Buttfumble Sports. That way you can find all of our content and engage with us. We love talking sports, especially the NFL. We can't wait to do it again a week from now. We will see you then. Please engage with us. Please reach out. We love to talk to you guys. But until then, good luck with all of your teams.